Okay, guys, welcome back. This is day 3. This is the last of the 3 lessons that we did before the March break, so hopefully you have notes for this already, and you're just using this to refresh your memory. So in order to make our table of values, substitute the value of x into the equation. And solve for y. -2 plus 1 is -1, so -5, +5 times 2 is 10. Now, don't worry, your complete computer screen didn't glitch out or anything like that. I just simply went, you don't need to sit and watch me as I'm figuring this stuff out. You're in good shape. 6, 7, 8. Notice once I found my vertex, my axis of symmetry, I just matched my points, made them equally far away from the axis of symmetry, and graphing was easy. So your graph should look something like this. Vertex is at 1, -8. Optimal value is -8. Axis of symmetry, notice it's the formula again. Opens up. X-intercepts are -1 and 1, 2, 3. And the y-intercept is -6. Now, before we move on, I want you to notice the intercepts. Here we have +1 and -3. Here we have +3 and -1. We're taking the signs and switching them. And this works every time that we do this. So, key features. In order to find your x-intercepts, remember I just said that we are changing the sign? That's why we had the negative sign in front of the R and the S. Because if it's a 5 and I put the negative sign in there, now it's a -5. If it's a -5 and I put the negative sign in there, now it's a +5. Okay, so we are changing the signs. Y-intercept. Sub x equals 0 into the equation. You could memorize that it's a times r times s. I don't like that. It's much easier just to memorize one thing. Axis of symmetry. So we find the midpoint between any 2 points with the same y value. Conveniently enough, our x-intercepts do that. So we can really use r and s in here. Optimal value. The axis of symmetry, AOS, into formula. And solve, just in case people wanted to not do that. All right, and then the vertex is the combination of your axis of symmetry, x, and your optimal value, y. So I'm sure that was all clear as mud. I personally never liked learning without numbers. So let's give you some specific examples that are a little bit more concrete. Y-intercept zeros, axis of symmetry, vertex. So let's start with y-intercepts. Find the y-intercept by subbing 0 in for x. And remember, when I do the PDF, anything that's hard to read, I will type out again. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 7 is 70. X-intercepts. I have a +5 up top, so it's -5. I have a -7 at the bottom, so it's +7. Axis of symmetry. So x equals 7 minus 5, because I think that's how we're all comfortable looking at it. That will be 2 over 2, which equals 1. So now we're going to take the formula, and we're going to substitute 1 in wherever x is. Oh, what is that? 6 times 6 is 36, times 2 is 72. Negative, negative. Okay. So the vertex is 172. Remember that closing brackets. And exactly the way the previous screen looked, except that it's all with numbers this time and hopefully easier to understand. Now, there are two other formats, factored form, that we haven't really looked at yet. The first one is what happens when we have the same value multiplied by itself. Now, you might be saying this actually doesn't follow factored form, but it does. Because remember, that squared means we have the value multiplied by itself twice. So what you need to memorize is 1x intercept. Okay, so this is a special case. So y-intercepts. Now the nice part about this is that because it's squared, means less math for us. So the y-intercept is at 75. Now you could memorize this. I guess I gotta figure. So the x-intercept is 5. There we go. Sorry, that's a really bizarre A. Now, hopefully you would just memorize this. This one is a nice memorizing thing. Right? Since there's only one value, the midpoint between only one value is that value. So again, let's substitute 5 in. Oh, it's going to be nice and easy. Now, I can go through the math if you want, but 0 squared is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. All right. Now, this one is also a special case. However, this one is more readily apparent. It definitely follows our pattern if we think of it like this. It's just, why would we bother writing out x plus 0? So we just leave it as x. So, what happened there? 0 plus 4 is still 0, is still 4, I'm sorry, but 4 times 0 is 0, and 0 times negative 2 is 0, and I'm just speeding the math along a little bit. So in this case, the x-intercepts are 0, and we have a plus 4 up there, so the other one is minus 4. Minus 4. There we go. The joys of technology. All right. So now we know our axis of symmetry is negative 2. Y equals negative 2 times negative 2 bracket negative 2 plus 4. Don't worry. When I redo this into a PDF, I will make it more legible. So it means our final vertex is negative 2 and 8. Okay? We've actually been doing most of this already. We've just been kind of doing it piecemeal and mostly off the graph. Now we're putting it all together. So, of course, we're going to have to make this a little bit more complicated. We want to create a factored form from the graph. Now, factored form always has the style. And you are going to have to memorize this. We don't know what A is. We're going to have to find that. However, we do know that our first point, our first x-intercept is -7. So we're remembering to change the sign. So now it's a +7. And our second one is x plus 3. Now we have to choose a point on graph, not the x-intercepts. Okay? Those ones, if you, I mean, they're valid points, but what'll end up happening is, what? What'll end up happening is, sorry, I had to pause that for a second there. I accidentally deleted that statement. If you choose one of the x-intercepts and put it into the formula to solve for A, the entire formula will disappear. It'll end up being 0. You're welcome to do it, whatever. Now, when you're choosing a point, always best to choose something that's on the grid lines. So for instance, I've just marked down 3 points that fall on the grid line. Doesn't matter which one you use. Just because I've already worked it out, I'm going to use the vertex. So it means that 8 equals A -5 minus plus, I'm sorry, 7 minus 5 plus 3, and we're going to solve. Remember your bed mass. Oh, that's a really badly written 4. There we go. Staring at that, trying to figure out what it was. Solve -2. And it makes sense that our A value is negative because our parabola opens down. So that's a quick double check. We'll come back to it and teach you another thing a little bit later on. But since we now know A is -2, we can sub that in. And rewrite out the equation using our x-intercepts. All right, x-intercepts of a parabola are -6 and 2. The parabola crosses the x-axis at -6. So we're going to try pretty much doing the same thing. Difference is that our sources, our information is coming from a different source. So we got to get used to interpreting what we have. So the x-intercepts are -6 and -2. So it means we know this. And remember, switch those signs. We also know that it crosses the y-axis at -6. So we can sub those values in. And solve. Okay. So here's your homework out of the text. Again, you may have done this already. You definitely want to try a few questions. Use Desmos to answer 8 or 9. You're welcome to use a table of values to graph everything if you prefer doing it that way.